Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Comprehensive Psy-Frame Guide, and today we are looking at a build that I found online. Personally, I don't play the pure deck, but I wanted to go over the pure deck, and this one is post-circuit break. So I took this from a Yugi tuber, Jaden BR, who is a Brazilian Yugi tuber, puts up a lot of really great stuff, constantly uses the YGO Core Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Simulator for link duels, and he put up this list, and it was a pretty nice list. I'm not going to go over what any of the cards do, because every single card was discussed on the previous videos, with the exception of a few extra deck cards, so I'm just going to run through this real fast. 3 of every Psy-Frame except for the multi-threader, and 0 Epsilon. Triple Ash, double card, which I like, because drawing into 2 cards is kind of dead. Also, every time you draw into a card, you kind of give up the ability to attack, so the idea is kind of to open it turn 1 and then hope you never see the other one. So 2 ofs are kind of, that's kind of how 2 ofs work. When you play a 2 of in your deck, you kind of want the option to open with 1 and then not see another. Maxi played double Feel Zone, and same kind of thing. It's the kind of card that you want to see, but you really don't want to see it until you've used one Psy-Frame, and you kind of want it to get banished naturally if you go second and your opponent activates a card on turn 1. So that's what that's there for. He's playing double Desires. Personally, I like Desires at 3 because you can unbanish your overloads with your Omegas to get things rolling. 2 Foolish Burial Goods. Personally, I think that's fine because the biggest issue with Foolish Burial Goods is sending Overload to the graveyard to search your field spell. Since you can't activate the search effect of Overload the turn you send it to the graveyard, it's kind of a backfire in some cases, so cards like Terraforming are better. But this gives you more options, so I kind of like this ratio of double Foolish Goods and 1 Terraforming. He's only playing 1 Pot of Duality. Now, a lot of people swear by 3 or even 2, but they don't really like the idea of playing 1 or none. And it is a deck where you don't do much on your turn, so it's kind of like the best scenario is you open Duality with a card and a Pot of Desires. That way you get maximum searchability out on the first turn of the game. The benefit of playing 1 Pot of Duality is you can't open with 2 or 3 Pot of Duality, which is a problem. He was playing Triple Circuit, and 2 of the new card that's going to be coming out called Evenly Matched, or Struggling Battle, is what most people are aware of it as. This is a good card for going second. Your opponent establishes a board, and then you proceed to the battle phase on your turn, and go straight to main phase 2 and activate this card, and they banish their board. So this is really good against a deck that'll make a big board, so this will kind of allow you to play against Spirals or any other kind of deck that will produce a board. It's pretty neat, although at 3 it's probably a problem, because you do need to keep a field spell on board to play, so personally I'm not sure how I feel about this card yet, but it makes sense. If you're going second, you definitely want a way to clear your opponent's board, and this clears back row and monsters, especially if they can't be destroyed, so it's pretty cool. And he was playing triple Metaverse, which is the new field spell searcher card, and only 1 Terraforming. So I'm trying to speculate as to the theory behind the ratios. The 1 Terraforming is good if you go first. These are also good if you go first. Matter of fact, these are only useful if you go first. So what are the benefits of playing a Metaverse over a Terraforming? Well, if you're going second, you couldn't establish a field spell anyway, so it doesn't really matter what they are. And there's no real need to have a field spell on your board on your own turn during your first turn. So if you go, let's say you're going second and you draw into Metaverse. If your opponent activates a card effect on your turn, you're just going to synchro with your monsters. The only way that goes poorly is if they activate a card effect in the end phase, but if you play the field spell, your opponent's not even likely to activate a card effect. So Metaverse is basically as good, if not slightly better than Terraforming in this deck, because you kind of trick your opponent to activating a card effect because they expect your Psy-Frames to get banished, and then you chain Metaverse and suddenly you can synchro with those monsters. So I think Metaverse is slightly better than Terraforming, but not by a lot. Additionally, it protects your field spell, because if it's in your deck, then when they're popping a back row and it turns into your field spell, then you've kind of protected it. So you have the option of using it as a circuit out of nowhere. Additionally, it protects your field spell from being destroyed while on field. So yeah, if you just set this, it gives them something to target. Another neat thing that you might want to do is just ending your turn. Could be dangerous, but you could set this if you don't want your opponent to think you have Struggling Battle down, and then when they enter the battle phase, or when you get towards the end of the battle phase, you can just activate the Metaverse and add the circuit to your hand, and now you still meet the condition to activate evenly matched and banish their board. So there are some issues with this card also. If your opponent can attack you, there's a potential for them to kill you. Excuse me, let me fix that. So in some of my test games, I found that my opponent just managed to put out 8,000 damage, and I didn't have a beta. But I purposely left my board cleared to use this, but I just got OTK'd. So there are some issues with this card. Everybody must play Triple Overload. Let's take a look at the extra deck that he put together. Triple Omega, one Thought Ruler Archfiend, which is not a card I'm particularly familiar with. It is a Psychic, so you can summon it with Psychic Field Zone. It has an interesting effect, which is when it destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can gain life points equal to that monster's attack, or original attack, whatever it says in the graveyard. So not good against pendulums, which are currently a thing. Also, if a spell or trap that targets one Psychic is activated, no other cards, you can pay 1,000 to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. So meaning you can negate the flipping face up of a spell or trap that will target a Psychic on the field. And most likely that'll be either an Omega or just him, and odds are there aren't enough of them to justify doing that. Alright, he plays one Stardust Spark, one Stardust. Stardust is probably better in a Psy-Frame deck because you want to clear your extra zone. I'm sure he thought it made sense to play Spark Dragon. I'm not sure if he did. Maybe he wants to protect the field spell, which you could... If you have Stardust Spark on the field spell isn't doing anything except being honest, so I'm not sure if I agree with this. One Michael, that's good for spot removal. Sometimes all you have to do is summon a monster, clear the board, and then attack for game, so that's pretty good. Odd Eyes Meteor Burst is great if you're up against a bunch of floaters, so I approve of Odd Eyes Meteor Burst. The particular build that I play just does not have room for it, or I might consider it. I got one Clear Wing, which is decent, solid against certain cards. I absolutely agree that double Zeta is the way to play a Psy-Frame deck. In my own personal deck, I was only playing one for a while, and what would happen is you would activate Alpha, search a Psy-Frame, then you make Zeta, and then Zeta can banish that monster from the extra deck. Then when you beta them and you try to go into beta, the only option you have would be a Black Rose, so there wasn't a good level 7 that I had that I wanted in my extra, so an extra Zeta is a good way to go, because you're really not going to resolve more than one Alpha and one Beta in a particular turn, so you're not going to make more than 2 7s, and you want 7s that can clear the board. So 2 Zetas is great. I do like a lot of his 7 choices. He had a Black Rose Moonlight, which is okay in certain scenarios. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Moonlight. Black Rose is probably the best card. Maybe even 2 Black Rose would be better here, but I don't know. I saw it in his video, which I'll link to up above, right up here. You can see that. He's playing Ancient Fairy Dragon and Ancient Sacred Wyvern, and Ancient Sacred Wyvern was really good at OTKing. Because if you're negating all your opponent's cards, you just keep leaving these Omegas on board. If you even leave one Omega with Ancient Sacred Wyvern, you can go for game pretty easily. Just because the difference in your life points can be made really big just by attacking with your Omegas. Now, I think I mentioned Ancient Fairy Dragon in the previous video, but this is really good. One, if you get hit with set rotation, you can't really activate any field spells, because that's going to be a big deal next format, so Ancient Fairy can clear the board of field spells and allow you to special summon one of your Psy-Frame tuners from your hand to synchro with the Ancient Fairy Dragon, either into Omega or a Crystal Wing or something of that nature. Anyways, I made a couple of adjustments to this deck, then I called it Jaden BR Psy 2. So let's take a look at my minor variation. I think I added 4 cards and made 1 extra deck change. Alright, so this is my version of this pure Psy-Frame deck. Please excuse this brief pause and check out my comedy sketch up above. I'm curious what people think of it. Let me know what you feel about it, otherwise I may keep doing them and not know if people like them or not. Thank you. Back to the deck profile. I liked a lot of what he had going, but I wanted to add a few things, and I didn't really want to remove any of the ideas or the ratios he had. I actually found them to be particularly good. So I added 1 multi-threader, just because I like the Black Rose play where you protect your cards, and in this particular build I find the field spells constantly up, so I wanted to be able to protect it, and when I was testing, I didn't really want to Black Rose, because I constantly didn't want to lose my stuff. But yeah, 1 copy of multi-threader is pretty cool. So I added the 1 multi-threader. Then I added a glow-up bulb, which I mentioned in a previous video is one of my favorite things to do. This is an excellent card if it gets banished with Potted Desires, because your Omega can put it back in the graveyard, and if you summon a Zeta, you can then upgrade into either another Omega or a Crystal Wing. So I like glow-up bulb. Even if you draw the glow up bulb, that's still not a problem. If you make a Zeta, again, you can just normal summon and go into Omega, and then the Zeta lets you recur a card. Secondly, it's still in the graveyard and you can use it again, so on the rare occasion you might need to OTK your opponent, you can just activate Glow Bulb and then tribute summon the Psy-Frame driver. So that's the only way to really put out attack points, is to tribute summon or perform synchro summons. I also added the third pot of Desires, and I'm not particularly nervous about drawing into extra Desires. You are playing a deck entirely of hand traps, so you do have a great amount of defense if you only draw one playable card and another pot of Desires, so I just want to get cards in the banish zone to start unbanishing them, and I want to get cards in my hand so my hand is more threatening, make my opponent fear me a little bit more. I also added the one emergency teleport, which personally I think is an amazing card in Psy-Frames because you can OTK your opponent by synchro summoning during the battle phase if you have the field spell on board. And additionally, you can upgrade your Zeta into Crystal Wing, which could be particularly helpful in winning a game in the middle of the battle phase, or you can also just use this to summon back the multi-threader if it winds up in your graveyard. I think that is all the cards I added. So what was that? The one multi-threader, the one glow bulb, third Desires, and emergency teleport. I made no other changes to the main deck. I thought the ratios were particularly good. I couldn't justify changing much of this. I didn't test it too much. I did test my build versus his build. I just put in the multi-threader thinking it really makes sense to try it, and just because I do have the emergency teleport in the deck. I made one other change, which is I pulled the Thought Ruler Archfiend out of this build and put in the Crystal Wing because I can make it and he couldn't. So if you can make a Crystal Wing, you might want to, because some decks just cannot get over a Crystal Wing. And then that's going to kind of wrap up this particular video on the pure builds. I didn't go into any side deck theory because I could do that in a separate video. Also, metas are always changing, so we could discuss different decks of all types and different matchups. Now, my issues with the regular pure Psy-Frame deck, the issues are always the same, and that is that they just don't handle unusual situations very well. They're very limited on what they can do. Like, I think I had to play against Harpies, which was a weird deck online. Not saying anyone should worry about Harpies, but new Harpy card is pretty cool. The trap, which says you can't activate monster effects. So yeah, if you can't activate monster effects in this deck, everything kind of stops. Something else happened. A barrier statue came out. You can't do anything under a barrier statue in this deck other than draw into Overload, which is not searchable if there's a barrier statue on the field. So you do have to be a little bit careful about some of the more strange and unusual matchups. So your side deck should really be designed to help you with that. Additionally, Pendulums are a terrible matchup, and this card is an excellent out for Pendulum boards. But yeah, playing it at 3 is kind of dangerous. Otherwise, you'll just have a handful of this, and they can only make a board like once. So yeah, it's not particularly good to play too many. So 2 of is great. Yeah, that's going to wrap up this video. In the next video, we're going to look at some of the hybrid builds. Specifically, we're going to take a look at my Shiranui Psy-Frame build, which is pretty neat. I'll put it here, but I'm not going to discuss it until the next video, and we'll see you next time.